Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sha-Kiya Gadson, and I am the host of the ListNing Project. And today we will be interviewing Mr. Charlie Boyd. But I'm excited because I got to meet you for a brief moment at a friend's gathering, and I felt like you could offer some really cool insight to our listeners. And so I want to say thank you for joining me here today.
Appreciate it. Don't know a lot about the platform, but looking forward to it. Us getting together and have a conversation. That's always good. People need to talk.
Wonderful. Okay, so let me fill you in on what the ListNing Project is. The ListNing Project is a baby of mine where I sit down with gentlemen and I try to get an honest gauge on what the male perspective is. I don't feel like there are enough safe spaces for men to come and talk and have honest, candid conversation about what it is that they're actually going through in the world. Whether they are teenagers all the way up to men that are retired and trying to, enjoy their last days. I want the gamut just so that people understand that we honestly in society have no idea what is going on from the male's perspective. And we need to ask more questions in order to gain more knowledge on that. I feel like we do a really good job of hearing women, but in my opinion, and it might not be the popular opinion, but I feel like if we get a better gauge on what's going on with men, we can do a lot more in terms of changing things.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what you summarized when we first met, and that's beautiful. I think one of the things is getting men to speak to, because they need safe spaces. You said the key word, safe spaces. A lot of men aren't going to share their perspective because the way society views us, especially men of color, differently based on you give a response, you state something, and it's judged out of context, or it's taken in another character. And that can happen to anyone, but men are very vulnerable to that because of the standards that society has put out there for us and our rules that we're supposed to have. That can be a tricky subject for many
men. I agree. And so my job here is to provide you with a safe space so that you are free to share. And maybe what you can impart on me and others will help someone to see many options or different ways of looking at things or different conversations that might come about from what we will talk about today.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. And any subject is open. I don't have a problem voicing my opinion.
Okay.
So after serving almost 30 years in the military, and sometimes, depending on the setting, you had things that you restricted and you had to play a certain role. After returning from the military and getting in the industry, I really don't have a problem.
Okay.
I'll hug you later if I offend you or say something's over, but you're going to hear my opinion. I don't have a problem.
I like that. And I am excited. Okay. So let's just start off with your earlier years. How would you describe your upbringing?
Ooh, my upbringing is very different from many of my male friends. I grew up in a family with a mom and dad, inner city, on the East Coast, Wilmington, Delaware, almost like a suburb of Philly, really, because when you say Delaware to the military crowd, they think Dover.
Dover, exactly.
That state. Now, where I'm from, if you look at the line between Delaware and Pennsylvania, my house is almost on the line. It's that far north. So we're right there, Wilmington, Delaware, at the top. Maybe Claymont, Delaware is the only one city in Delaware before you get to Pennsylvania. But it was inner city. Had a mom who was a nurse, stayed at home with the kids until we were old enough to speak and talk on it,
Okay.
It really ingrained in me because, I wanted my wife to stay at home until my youngest was old enough to say, hey, daddy, he did it. Or that's the one, you know what I mean?
Right,
so
I understood.
Really ingrained. So my father was retired Air Force. When he got out in 71, right as the Vietnam War was closing down, the only job he could get is as trash man.
Gotcha.
Right now, retired military man, he was a trash man. Drove the truck because he had military experience. He wasn't the guy out there going to get the baskets. And then he moved into a position working for the water department. Back east, it snows. So he drove dump truck for whenever they have burst pipes in the ground. and they fixed them. He also drove the snowplow. Very hardworking guy. But one of the things that I would say from a male perspective, my dad's generation didn't really talk to us a lot. I got to see what being a man looked like every day. I got to see the hard work. But when my dad spoke to you, it was some correction coming or something like that. It wasn't like nowadays where you can sit down and talk with your kids. That just wasn't their thing from that era, the civil rights movement, all that stuff that was going on at the time. It was just different. So, but I did get to see what a man looks like every day, and I'm so blessed on that. A lot of my male friends didn't have a dad in the house, where they had multiple, 2, 3, 4 different
male
types
figure.
of dad. Yeah, you know what I mean? So for me, having that steady figure from being a kid to, leaving the house at 17 and joining the Air Force, really solidified who I am and me being comfortable with myself, right? My mother and father, they always made sure that I knew I was good and I could do anything if I put my head to it, right? So it wasn't always good. I was a knucklehead when I was younger, right? But having that support system, it gave me the confidence to try. Some of my friends, they don't try because they're afraid of failure. And I'm like, okay, if I fail, I learn something.
That's an interesting perspective on that. When you say your father provided you the guidance, or I guess the overall description of what a male is, what did that turn into for you? What did that mean?
Okay, so in our household, there's 3 sisters older than me. I'm the baby, but I'm the only boy. Unique because I was born on Father's Day too, so that's kind of neat for my dad, cool. Right? So that was cool for him. But in the household, I didn't have to do dishes, none of that inside stuff. I took care of the garbage, took care of outside stuff, but it got done, right? I got to see it. He set those standards. My dad was a cook in the Air Force before he retired. And, the kitchen had to be clean. If he came home from driving the snowplow, there was a dish in the sink, somebody was waking up.
Oh, wow.
It was going to get clean because him running a kitchen, it was just going to be clean. And standards don't change. You may go through hard times, you may be dealing with something, but guess what? There better not be any dishes in that sink.
And it's okay, all right.
Those type of standards that he set was like, okay, you may go through something and you may not be able to give your best, but the standard doesn't change. You just didn't meet it today. Tomorrow you get another opportunity. It is what it is.
That's a very healthy way of looking at that. So when your sisters had to do what you call inside chores or duties, how did that play out later on when you became an adult, when you saw that men do the outside chores or duties and women do the inside chores or duties?
Well, it's funny because, I don't really believe in absolutes and things. My dad was a cook, so he did most of the cooking. So we did do inside stuff, but we didn't do the cleaning, things like that. My mom was old school, so she ironed the drapes, washed the drapes. She did things that it took a long time to find women that could uphold the standard that I was used to, right? And not that they had to do it because I clean, I do laundry, I cook, I clean up in the house, I work from home. So I'm not afraid of doing inside stuff because the last thing I want is for when my woman comes home from work, if I work from home, why she got to clean and do all this stuff? I've been there all day, right? So if I have the time, I try to take care of things in the house. So I said inside things, but like dishes, cleaning, laundry, I never had to do that as a kid, right? I had one of the messiest rooms in the world. I don't know how my dad let me get away with that. But I did work. I started working at 14, but oh my God, I had a messy room. Couldn't even see the floor. I don't know how he let me get away with that.
So do you feel like growing up there was an even spread in terms of what boys do versus what girls do in terms of nurturing, and how did that play out, like as far as sports or how you saw playing? What did that look like for you?
I don't know whether it was divided, even though there was 3 girls and me. My oldest sister, she went off to college when I was younger, maybe around 11, somewhere around there, 12, 13. So she had moved out of the house. but the other two were there, and I don't think we didn't, those lines weren't as salient or pronounced, right? I mean, they nurtured all of us, right? My mom was very loving. I mean, my mom was 4'8", 4'9". My dad was 6'2".
Oh, wow.
So when guys would come date my sisters, they'd be worried about the big fella.
And it's the mom.
And I was like, man, you better worry about that badger over there because she's going to get the boy. That's because her temperament. I mean, whoa, my mom, the stories that her brothers and sisters would tell. I remember a little boy called her the N-word when she was about 10. And she chased the boy home, ran up the stairs, and back then they had the wood burning stoves.
Mm-hmm.
She banged the boy's head against the wood burning stove while his mom was cooking. Now,
that's brave.
That's brave. As a little black girl, back in those days, little Caucasian boy. And,
she was about that life. She was not playing.
She was not playing. Mom did not play, so she was little, but get on the wrong side if you want to.
Okay. So how did that play out being the youngest and a boy? Like, do you feel, because right now in society, there's this thing where it's like mothers are raising their daughters to be more masculine or manly, and they're coddling their sons. Did you ever experience where you felt like mom's favorite because you were a boy?
Yeah, I was a mama's boy. I was. So I was the only boy. My dad was a huge baseball dude. He was a country boy from Lake Cross, Virginia. Played Negro League ball, not with the teams, but when the Negro League teams would come through the Chitlin circuit or whatever down, they call it down south. He would play with his home team from Lake Cross, Virginia. So he got to play with, against some of those guys, gifted athlete. But I was mama's boy because I was home with her. She stayed home. So, I mean, me and my dad were really close, very close. We had a real good relationship, but dads didn't talk back then, right? My mom really didn't talk, but I talked more with her because I was around her more, right? Because I was home all the time, before I went to school. So having that bond, being the only boy, I think, my mom and I was definitely a mama's boy. I can't deny that.
Okay. So does being a mama's boy back then look different than what you feel like it looks like now?
I don't know, because each situation is different, right? You have to look at what environment they're in, what they come up with, and what those kids need, right? I have two boys. My boys are two very different individuals. My oldest one, if I just made a nod that I was disappointed in him, that would crush him. He tried to do so good, to be good. My youngest one, who didn't have the hardships because he came along 7 years later, and we had a little bit more resources by the time he came along. And by the time he's a teenager, we were doing very well. So he didn't have those challenges, but he's stubborn as hell. Stubborn as hell. So, each situation, each kid, they're both my sons, two different personalities.
Okay.
Those two kids need different approaches. Yeah, if I tell my youngest one, don't do this, he's going to dig in.
Yeah, he's going to go harder.
He's going to dig in. He's going to go harder. So I got to approach him a little bit different than I would my older son when he was younger. So I don't know whether there's a one cookie cutter approach to that. You got to look at each situation. And I'm just taking my personal kids, right? I do a lot of mentoring in San Antonio through my fraternity. I was on the board of Big Brothers and Sisters for about 7 years, and you see all these kids, and each kid is different, each personality. You have to nurture them, find out what's important to them, what growth stage they're in, the age that children are is very important too. The young ones, they need direct and structure. They need that. But as they start to get a little older, you can't be as direct. You gotta, encourage that creativity. You gotta see what their personality is. Let them find their own way. And I think that's why I love my parents so much, because they supported me in whatever. I messed up a lot as a kid, being the only boy, being the youngest. Yeah, I told stories. I lied. I did everything. I snuck out the house
Mm-hmm.
because I'm in the house with all women. You know, my dad's
Right.
working. I can get out of here. So I used to, sneak out the house when I'm on punishment, go hang out with my buddies. And it was never the right thing, but they would correct me, but they always encouraged me. They always encouraged me. Yeah,
Okay.
long-winded answer to your
No, no,
question.
no, not long-winded at all. I feel like it's important for people to see the different aspects because, like you said, there are a lot of men that did not have that range of having two parents and understanding what it looked like, and also knowing that just because you have two parents doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. So,
Facts, facts.
it's important to get that range. So it wasn't long-winded at all.
That's one of the reasons why I left Big Brothers and Sisters. Great organization. They do great work. But you hit it right there. You can have a kid that has both parents. They still need a mentor, right? They still need a mentor. Maybe the dad's busy. Maybe he's a stepdad. Maybe he just doesn't have a connection. The kid needs an ally that he can confide in, right? Especially young men. That's huge. I know young girls need it too. Not my area of specialty.
Right.
I've never raised girls. I raised two boys, and I mentor young men. So, yeah.
Okay. So you said you were in the military, and we thank you for serving your country.
Thank you.
How was that coming up and being in the military and being a man in the military?
Oh my God. I I really, really appreciate my military service because when I came up, are you familiar with busing?
No.
So busing is a term back in, I guess it was 70s, where they shipped the inner city kids out to the suburbs for elementary and middle school or middle school. And then you went to the suburbs where it was mainly Caucasian kids. So the inner city kids got shipped out to the suburbs for middle school, but then high school was the reversal. We went to high school in the city, and the suburb kids got shipped in for high school.
Oh, that's a
Right.
big.
So, but I'm glad they did it because it really broadened my view. My dad retired, got the GI Bill.
Mm-hmm.
With his retirement, a lot of Vietnam vets that were men of color didn't get the GI Bill. They denied it. They put paperwork and you didn't get it. So you couldn't get a GI loan back then. My dad's commanding officer made sure he got it. So that helped us. The house he could afford was on a block, one block from what I guess you would call where all the black folks live.
Okay.
We were the only black family on the block. Only black family on the block. And when busing started, I'll never forget it, sixth grade, it was the same year that Alex Haley's Roots came out, the miniseries.
Interesting.
So miniseries comes out right before school starts, and then we get shipped to the suburbs. So when we get shipped to the suburbs, there's these grown white adults saying, go back to Africa, all this laying down in front of the buses. I'm shocked. And, again, my only exposure really to white folks was the ones I lived with, which we didn't really play with. And these people laying down in front of our buses telling us to go back to Africa. And I'm like, I'm from the West Side. I'm not from Africa.
Right. I have no recollections of any of that. Like this is my home.
But again, having that loving relationship I had it in the family, I was able to absorb all that, go through it. There's still, I'll never forget, there was a little white girl named Karen Donnelly. I love her to death, still friends with her today. And after we went through all that and got into class, I sit down and I'm sitting next to her because it was alphabetical. My last name was Boyd, hers was Dominic. She happened to be the next one. So I was sitting next to her and she sang the Mickey Mouse song, M-I-C-K-Y.
Yes.
She saw we were stressed. So she was like, sing with me. Man, we sang that song. We were fast friends. The kids were great. You had a couple ones that were out there, but the kids were great. The parents were ones, right? So you asked the question about the military. When I came in the military, my view on race relations was really out of whack. I thought grown white folks were crazy, all on the races, because I didn't have a whole bunch of exposure, right?
Got you.
Coming in the military, that quickly changed because many of my supervisors and the kids that I went through basic training with didn't look like me.
Right.
They had my back. They were looking out for me. Some of my greatest mentors didn't look like me. Not saying that My mentors didn't help, but I gained so much from these other folks. And then I start doing research. Okay, the March on Washington, Martin Luther King's march, there was a lot more white people there than we give credit.
Right.
You look at the Civil War, a lot of white people died in slavery. And we don't ever acknowledge that. Now, we need to acknowledge all the great stuff black people are doing too, but when you divide, division makes smaller every time. So you can't divide. We got to try to come together with like-minded people, regardless of what they look like. And you asked about how coming up in the military, if I didn't have that military experience, I can't imagine how angry I would have been, but it really changed me. I got to see things start judging people for who they were, who they showed you that they are.
Mhm.
You know, I love being black, love being black. I am a positive black man, do a lot of things, but you got to view people, all people. You don't get to decide what race you're born,
Right.
right? We just don't. So it just happens. So you, I have a hard time judging people for something they had nothing to do. Now their behavior wants to show you who they are. That's something different. That's something different. Believe them when they show you who they are. So
Okay. So when you look at your military career and prior to that, your interactions with people, what do you think about the concept of getting out and showing your children the world or showing inner city kids more than just what's in their neighborhood so that they are not in a culture shock or they're not set in their ways when it comes to moving around in the world? Because I have a lot of friends that have never left my borough.
wow.
And they're grown.
Yeah.
I'll be 46, and some of them are older than me and have never left that borough. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I had that same thing, right? When I go back to parts of Philly and Wilmington, Delaware, I have friends that haven't left home either, right? Now, some of them have traveled, done some things, but they stayed there. Their mentality is still the same that mine would have been if I didn't come in the military, right? So it's a little bit different. For me, it's very important. When I retired, I chose to retire in San Antonio. I was going to retire in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
We were stationed there before we came here. And Hawaii is beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's all Asian Pacific Islander culture, right? Because tourism. My son was 10 at the time, 11. You know, I was like, he needs to be exposed to other cultures. I can't just have him formative years, Asian Pacific Islander. That's all he's exposed to. So we took one more assignment, came to San Antonio, ended up retiring here. And good, the demographics aren't as mixed as I'd like him to be exposed to, but it's a little bit more. And we're closer. I can get him to other things, right?
Okay. So your sons right now, you said you hit on something that I feel like a lot of people that live in San Antonio, they harp on and they have a big gripe with is the demographics. How do you feel like, because there are a lot of black people in San Antonio, but they are in their own little pockets or they do the same type of thing. And so they don't really know that there are things outside of their scope to do in San Antonio.
Yeah.
How do we go about, or how would you suggest people go about exposing themselves to things that are in San Antonio? Like we've got a really cool cultural scene, like fashion and all kinds of stuff. Like where would they do? How would they do that?
We do, but I think you have to focus on what you can control, right? In San Antonio, we're 6-7% black here, not a high number. Houston has a much larger demographic. Dallas has a much larger demographic. I love visiting those cities. I like San Antonio better. I like the slow pace, maybe the age I'm at now. I'm not out here looking to hang out in clubs. I'm not doing that. I would like to go see some black plays, some other things like that, but I can get to it. I have the means to get there if I need to. But here, I think we have to really express ourselves and embrace our culture, right? With my fraternity, historically black fraternity, we do a lot of things, right? That little white kid, that little Mexican kid, they need to see black men doing positive things just as much as our black children do, right? So if you embrace it, then, you know, we have to be the sermon we want to see, right? And not hear it. We don't talk about it, but you got to do things. You got to get out there, right? You know, I target the east side where Used to be back in the day, it was primarily black. Now it's primarily Hispanic, but we're in a city that's 76% Hispanic.
Hispanic, right? It's going to happen.
I don't have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think discovering those pockets, if you're out here and you're trying to do good in the world, you just got to get outside your comfort zone. You got to try new things. That's why community service, I really love it, because you get exposed to people that you normally wouldn't see. People either love San Antonio or they hate it.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, why are you leaving San Antonio? Why do you hate it? You came here and you did the same thing. You never changed your routine. You were expecting, you say you're coming from the borough in New York, someone moves here from New York and they never leave their neighborhood like they do in New York. That's going to be a problem here, right?
Right.
It's going to be very boring.
Yes, it's going to be very boring.
Yeah.
Especially depending on what side of town you live on, you might not see anything other than residential.
Yeah.
So you said that you were in a fraternity. What are your thoughts on fraternity life as a young person? There are a lot of misconceptions about fraternities. Let's start there. And some of them stem from truth. Some of them stem from misinformation. I will say that. How would you describe your decision to become a part of a fraternity?
Probably besides getting married and having children, probably the most important decision I ever made.
Really?
Yeah, probably the most important. Now, people, they will look at isolated incidents, they'll look at several things strung together, and they'll make a judgment. Most of the time, people outside the organization or people brand new to the organization that haven't given it time, right?
Mm-hmm.
All fraternities, not just mine, all fraternities, all sororities, they pull their members from society, right? They get members from society. You have, if you look at a bell curve, you're going to get
the whole gamut.
You're going to get the whole gamut of what's in society. You're going to have outliers. You're going to have problems. You're going to have things that have situations. And even within the fraternity, when incidents happen, those of us that have been in the fraternity, I'm going on almost 30 years, those that have been in for a while and seen things, have done the research, have talked to some of our historic leaders, not just in a fraternity, but in America, you get a different perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but expecting fraternities or sororities or any organization to be the cure-all for society's ills is a mistake. Going to have problems. There's going to be things that it is. So they're out there, right? And the one thing that I like about my fraternity is most of us don't care what you think.
Very true.
We just don't care.
Very true.
You're going to have your opinion. You're going to believe what you want. We're going to do the work. Last year, we gave out $62,000 in scholarships here.
Mm-hmm.
For the year before that, $58,000. The year before that, $52,000. We're doing a lot of work, a lot of community service. We'll let you talk. We're just going to do the work.
Right.
We're just going to do the work.
Okay. So, in becoming a member of a fraternity, how did you maintain your individuality and not get caught up in the think tank or the larger group? How did you not get swallowed up in that? Or did you ever have a point where you did?
I don't think so, because I pledged a little later. I came in the Air Force right at 17, right out of high school. Went on to serve, got my degree while I was in the military. I pledged while I was in the military. So I was a little over. I wasn't that normal college student right out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had, my dad and my mom, the standards they set for me, right? So being a little older, having some individuality, being a leader in the Air Force, all that I think contributed and helped. Mm-hmm. And then I had some great mentors who brought me into the fraternity, great mentors that I still rely on today. I still talk to many of them. And they really set me straight, right? So stuff is going on, like a lot of things, people will see the cues out here hopping, doing different things. And from the outside, it seems like one thing, right? If you don't know anything about fraternity, you just see these angry black men out here doing whatever. Mm. No, it's not that. we're telling stories when we do different hops and we're doing different chants and we're doing whatever. So we're communicating. There's things that we're talking that cues understand. Society at large, they're just going to see something. They see a show.
Right.
It's a purpose for us. So, yeah.
Okay. So being a man, being in a fraternity, having an established career, being a husband, being a father, how do you deal with the times when things get hard? How do you handle that? How do you express or, communicate? I'm having a hard time.
It's really hard because, well, for me, I go back to my upbringing, my parents showing me that hard work, right? That grit, going to work all the time. Mom got up, went to work. Dad got up, went to work. He'd work all day. It'd snow. He'd stay at work, plow the streets, do whatever. That work ethic, never give up. And then the sport that I chose, I was wrestling. There's only you out there on the mat. You can't blame it on somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
If things don't go right, it's up to you. You got to do your practice. You got to do your routine. Wrestling is a thinking man's sport because to every move there's a counter. So you got to prepare.
Right.
You got to do your film study. You got to look. You got to know what moves, if you're going to do these moves, what are the counters to them that your opponent's going to do. You got to think about it, right? You got all those things you got to think about. So for me, I don't like to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a giver. I give it. But when I'm having a hard time, I always have those mentors, those people that are in my life, long-term friendships that I can reach out and talk to. But it's really hard to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
I always think I can handle it. I don't think that I've been overcome. I mean, early in my military career, I was burning a candle at both ends. And one of my supervisors pulled me aside and said, dude, you're going to burn out. You got to take a break. You got to do whatever. So it's hard to ask for help.
So not asking for help. Have you ever silently reached a point where you were like, this is too much?
No, I can't say that I have. I've gotten to the point where stuff has been really hard. I don't think I've ever gotten to the point where I said this is too much. Maybe Desert Storm. When Desert Storm kicked off, I was in Germany. We were working long hours. It was tough. But I don't think it was too much because other people were in it with me. They were in the struggle. I wasn't by myself. You're all working through it. But that was hard times. I was away from my oldest son. That was hard times, but I don't think it was ever anything that I could handle. And that goes back to confidence that my mom and dad instilled in me, right? Yeah, it may be hard, but as long as you're still in the fight, you're all right. You just got to keep plugging at it. You may not get victory today, but it's coming if you keep working.
Okay.
Right. So I can't say that I've ever gotten to a point where it's too hard.
Having two sons, have you ever, being your position that you were in, have you ever found that your ability to just keep plugging away has impacted them negatively, considering you have two separate sons?
Yes, most definitely. I'll never forget, man, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Because I'm not afraid to cry. I broke down and I was crying about it, thinking about the story I'm about to tell you. But when we were in Hawaii, I worked a lot of hours. I mean, I lived on base, walked across the street to go. All the other husbands in housing didn't have jobs like mine. I'm a network computer engineer guy. So, working on computer networks, the Pacific is the largest theater of operations that we have. Land wise, it covers a lot of area. Mm-hmm. So anywhere from Alaska, Korea, Japan, Hawaii, Guam, all those areas are covered. So we worked a lot. I'd get home 9 at night, 10 at night. My son would be asleep. And what really hit me, my wife told me when we got here, is my son would tell her back then, she never told me, but he would tell her back then, why doesn't my daddy love me like these other fathers? Because they're coming home and he's not. And she explained to him, what was going on. Now that he's older, he's 25 now. We have those discussions. I sat down and talked to him, walked him through that. He understands now, but what I learned from my father not talking to me, I probably over communicate with my son because I want to make sure he gets it. So I talked to him and I said, look, when he was coming up, I said, you can't have the hunger I have. I grew up in the inner city. We didn't have a lot of money. You have resources.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to find what motivates you.
Right.
Yeah. I was motivated by a whole different
set
of standards, right? I said, whatever motivates you, whatever your drive, whatever mental gymnastics you got to play to get out of bed, do whatever you got to do. Let's figure that out. Let's figure out what works for you. And let's do that. And, he's pretty successful. He's 25, graduated from college, bought his first house year before he graduated.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing well. He has problems. I have problems still, but we found a way to get him motivated and to drive him a little different.
Okay.
My oldest son, unfortunately, he struggles with substance abuse. So he's not close. He struggles with substance abuse. And that's a situation that's hard because I can't help him until he wants to help, right? I just can't. So right. It is what it is. Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate you sharing with me and, being candid because I feel like these are a lot of things that, like I said, my viewers, they go through. And people, regardless of age or race, can relate to having the need and the drive to succeed, to make sure that your family does not have the same struggles that you have. You want to be successful. And sometimes that success comes at, an unknown cost.
There's always a cost. Yeah. There's always a cost.
Having children, I have 2 children of my own. Like you said, they have different struggles. And sometimes as a parent, you're like, that's what you're complaining about? You're complaining about having options?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa, and you never think about that.
Yeah. But you got to be real with your kids too. I mean, I learned I really have to talk to my kids. And, my son, I'm busy now. When he calls and says, Dad, hey, I want to hang out or you got something going on. The fact that he made the call, I'm moving my schedule. There's something that we need to talk about, right? When he makes that call, he's here, he's local. When he makes that call, we either go to a cigar bar. He doesn't smoke, but he knows I do. So we go to a cigar bar, we'll go hang out, and we just talk about things, right? Whatever is on his mind. I don't try to give him answers. I try to walk him through the process of figuring out his own answers.
Mm-hmm.
But, for men, that's tough because, you said having safe spaces, right? One of the reasons why joining my fraternity was one of the greatest decisions in my life was I know I have a bond of real true friends that I can go to no matter whether I'm winning, losing, or just being mediocre. Mm-hmm. And they're going to set me straight. A lot of people don't have that, right? And I won't say all my fraternity brothers that way, but I have those few that I have that core that I can go talk to. There's a lot of men out here. You got to watch who you share with.
Mm.
There was a quote that I heard. They said, watch who you let in your life because they'll change your life.
Yes. You
know what I mean? You got to watch that. So a lot of men, it's a doggy dog world out here. You talk to some men, they're going to use it against you. You really got to watch what's going on. But having those true friends, and when I say by that, I don't mean people to think like me. I have some friends that when they contact me, they're doing some foul stuff.
Mm.
And I just got to tell them, dude, you're doing foul stuff, but you're my boy, not because you do the things I think you should be doing. You're my dude, but you're going to hear it from me. I'm going to tell you you're foul.
So how does that work? Because I hear that with a lot of men. They have friends that are doing things that if it was an outside individual, they would think that they were like terrible. How do you distinguish between what your friends are doing and what you decide from other people is acceptable?
I don't know whether I phrase it that way because for me, other people are going to live their life. Mm-hmm. What you do doesn't have to be acceptable to me. Doesn't.
Okay.
But my friends, the close circle that I know a lot of people, but I have a close circle, confidence. And my friends are my friends, and they're not perfect.
Right.
They do some foul stuff sometimes. They just do. But I don't put conditions on our friendship. We're friends because we've been through a lot. We served together. We've done whatever. I had a friend that, I don't want to go there.
Okay.
I don't want to go there.
Yeah, we don't want to tell somebody else's story, so I understand.
Yeah, when a friend does something that's out of character, as a friend, I need to tell him. But I'm not going to preach to you. I'm going to tell you, look, dude, you're out of pocket right now. If it's something illegal or something that's put me in danger, that's a whole different story. But, your friends, they fall short, right? We all fall short. So when they're falling short, you just got to tell them about it, hold them accountable, move on.
Do you ask them, do you dive deep, or do you go to telling them what's wrong? Or do you ask the question like, hey, how did we even get here? Like, this isn't like you. How did we get here? Or do you just immediately tell them where they're falling short?
It depends on the friend. It depends on the friend and what they're open to, right? Because different people need different things, right? Some people need a nudge. Some people need a punch in the neck, right? So
punch in the neck.
You know what I mean?
We're assaulting our friends now? Is that a thing?
Hey, men, we handle things differently, right?
Okay.
Rather getting through all emotions, sometimes you just got to grab a dude and choke him. I'm joking. But fellas, when you hug them, you see, bros, when we do the man embrace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whisper in the ear. There's certain brothers I know that struggle with confidence. Every time I hug them, I tell them, look, man, I love you. You're enough. Stuff like that that you deal with. You got to know your friends for what they need. So the friends that are falling short or doing something wrong, I don't know all his struggles. Even my close friend, he's gonna tell me some of it. But there's another side to that story, right? There's another side. So I try not to go deep like that. I just call out what I see, no judgment, and let you deal with it, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to call it out now. If you ask for help, cool, right? I got one of my friends that struggles with financial success, but he refuses to ever do a budget.
Mm-hmm.
That's wasted information.
Energy, right?
That's wasted energy to try to talk to him, right? I've known him for years. Will not do a budget. I'm like, dude, you know why you're struggling, right?
Because you don't have accountability for your stuff. Everything's everywhere.
You got to know where everything is. You got to balance everything to make your money work for you. And I said, but that's wasting energy. We don't talk about that anymore. Just when he starts talking, I said, bro, I'm not going to hear that. I'm not going to hear that today.
Okay.
But that's that friend. He's not going to do that because he's stubborn. He doesn't want to do things. I'm like, bro, I can show you some things, but you got to ask, bro. I'm not going to waste energy. I got other things I got to do today.
Okay.
If you want help, I can give it. But, can't force it.
Okay.
But you asked a pointed question. You said, how do you deal with friends that aren't doing what they're supposed to do? That's a tricky subject because you got to be careful of not making your friendships conditional. You're my friend because you do the things I think you should do, right? Then what happens when they fall and they need you to pick them up?
Right. Then they no longer trust you.
If they're not your friend when they're down in the dumps, then were they ever really your friend?
I agree with that.
You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So when they're going through it, friends that go through divorces, that have problems. When you go through a divorce or you lose a spouse, one of my friends lost his wife to cancer, it changes you. You're not going to be at your best. You got to give them grace a little bit. And you got to pick them up. Because if you're only friends when it's high and the sun is out and the flowers are blooming, okay, when it's raining and I'm in the mud, where are you? Well, if I'm your friend, I'm standing right next to you.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. So, I totally agree. I was more so like, I hear men that'll say, this guy A, it has children, maybe children from multiple women. And they're definitely not providing for child A that is not in the home like they should be. But that is something that they morally do not advocate for. They feel like that is like non-manly behavior. But they'll see their friend doing it and won't
Whoa.
say anything about it? Like, how do you justify, or how do men justify things that they are not advocates of, but see their close friends doing?
That's a hard one. And you said a mouthful there. You said a mouthful because with mentoring, right? There's a shortage of black males in mentoring. And I go around, I try to recruit these males to mentor, and they'd be like, bro, I got my own kids I can take care of. And I was like, bro, so I said, if you have your own kids that you're not taking care of, try this mentoring thing. Because when you give to other people, it's going to make you a better father. You know, when you're giving and you see what the challenges that these kids are dealing with that you're going to be mentoring, it'll make you go back and take care of your own. But then you got other things that are involved, right? You got history with the mother of the child. You got history. Maybe he didn't do what he was supposed to do. Maybe there's other people involved. You got all that. So I try not to judge.
Right.
I just say, try to be better tomorrow than you were today. That's not my position to judge them, but that's a lot. It's tough. And I equate it to a lesson I learned in the military. I was a young supervisor, and I was late for work one day, overslept, whatever. Came in the next day. I had some airmen that worked for me that were late. My supervisor was like, you need to get in there behind. I was like, well, I was late yesterday. Goes, yeah, but just because you didn't make the standard doesn't give them the okay not to make the standard. Okay. So the Air Force is paying you to make sure you're raising responsible, productive service members. You need to get on that. I was just late. But that stuck with me. He was like, okay, when I fall short, the standard doesn't come down. Back to what my father told me. Standard doesn't go down. I was late. I messed up. It's not okay for you to be late just because I was late. So I had to get on, because they had to grow up, be, productive people. I had to do better. But just because you fall short doesn't mean the standard comes down. No, the standard is still what the standard is. So it is what it is. You got to just try to be better.
So when you do that, do you address the fact that you fell short, or do you say you need to do better?
Yeah, we all need to do better.
Okay.
Right? We all need to do better, including me. I am far from perfect. I am not. I've messed up enough to learn the lessons, and I still have missteps now. I'm not perfect, but I've experienced a lot of things. I know what's more right than wrong.
Right.
Okay. So try to be more right than wrong. I'm not perfect. I'm not going to get it right all the time, but I can help you not make the mistakes I made.
In terms of everything that we've spoken about, how did you go about choosing the appropriate partner that went along with who you are and how you were raised to be, and your morals and your values? How did you choose that person?
Well, I was a reluctant participant, I would say. I will say that because I came from Germany. I was stationed in D.C., Chocolate City, right? To be in Germany.
Right.
I get to say, I was not looking for a relationship. Was not. Air Force sends me to Mississippi to school. I meet a young lady there. We start dating. I was not looking for a relationship. I was only there 6 months. We dated while I was there. I go back to D.C. She stays in Mississippi. She was Air Force as well. And broke it off. Don't do long distance relationships. I am in denial. I do not want a relationship. I'm not looking forward to it. I do not want it.
All right.
But she was everything. She was everything. I mean, I grew up in a household with mom and dad. She's one of the first people I met that spent time together that had both parents, original parents. She had both parents, right? There were 4 kids in their house.
So she matched you in those
dynamics. She was the oldest. I was the youngest.
She was the oldest. Question when we get
that's a whole different dynamic, right? But at that point, being in the military, having a son already from a previous relationship, and meeting her, the way she embraced me being a father, Went out in the clubs. Our first date after I left Mississippi, when she flew up to see me in DC, she was like, "Where are you taking me?" Grocery store. Got my son. We go to the grocery store.
Oh,
You know, so I was
that's
like,
different.
it's different. But she embraced it. She was good with it. It was all good. It wasn't about her. She really had the family values that I didn't know I was looking for. Right. And like I said, I was reluctant. I was not looking for a relationship, but I was like, I can't pass this up. I mean, here I was 26, I think, when we met, and I had never met anybody that matched me in the family value version of that. So, yeah, it just kind of.
You said you were reluctant. Do you feel like because of where you were in life, you had a lot of options, or was it just the idea of having been a dad and whatever happened or transpired in that relationship made you sour to it?
I don't know whether I would say I had a lot of options. I mean, physically, I used to be a bodybuilder back in Germany. So physically, I was pretty big, had a lot of attraction with a lot of women, but where I was about handling my business, just getting back from Germany, trying to rebuild that relationship with my son who was here on the East Coast, trying to do all those things, not making a lot of money, low in the Air Force. I think I was an East 5 staff sergeant, something like that. So I wasn't making a lot of money. So I had bigger goals of what I wanted to accomplish, and I was not there. So it was always that for me. I was never one of those people that was just out here chasing the relationships or chasing women. I was always about my business. It was like, I got to get to where I want to be. I became a dad at 19. So,
oh, wow.
Now, and for a lot of people, I would say that's the wrong thing. For me, it made me get serious about my life. Before that, I was hanging out with my boys, doing whatever. When I held my son at 19 for the first time, again, cried like a baby. I cried like a baby when I held him. It was just amazing. I'm responsible for this.
Okay.
At 19, right? But it made me get serious. After that, I really got serious about my business in the military. I was already in the military for 2 years, but I really got serious about striving for goals, trying to get better. Really got serious about going to college at that point. I was always taking at least one class at a time, 2 classes, weekends, whatever I could get credits. I was knocking it out. And eventually I ended up getting my degrees. But having a son was the catalyst for me. I don't recommend it for young people. Don't go out here and become a dad at 19.
Become a dad, because that will definitely be.
Yeah, makes hard. Makes hard.
So there was 2 things, because one, I feel like there's it's like something that's unspoken, but I think it really makes a difference when the man is the baby and the woman is the first daughter. I really feel like that creates this crazy dynamic, because the first daughter is usually the one that holds the gatekeeping to her family. Like, they've usually got a lot of motherly responsibilities on them. And so when you date a gentleman that's probably the baby, and they, like you said, they're like, okay, like, I don't know your struggles, because I don't know what the firstborn has to deal with. You are usually being raised with your parents. I sometimes feel like that creates this whirlwind, because you're on 2 different stages. I've already been sometimes a pseudo parent if I've got other siblings, and you've been able to not necessarily be free because you were the first son and you had a dad in the house, but there is a level of your parents are tireder because they've raised other children. Like, how does that work?
They are. And in my situation, my parents were definitely tired by the time I was my mom, me and my youngest sister are only 11 months apart. So my mom went to her follow-up appointment after giving birth to my youngest sister. And the doctor was like, "Miss Boyd, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're pregnant again." So that was a surprise. And they retired. I look back, I wrestled throughout high school. My parents made it to one wrestling match and they got there late. I was already done. I had already won. They missed it. I'd go on to state wrestling tournaments, never made it to any of them, but they worked. And they retired. I mean, look at pictures. There's a bunch of pictures of my other siblings.
Very few, right?
Very few of me, right? But that's okay. They did a great thing. My parents did a great job raising us. And that's where maybe the wrestling background, just the way my parents raised me, but there's no excuse. You just got to adapt to what your situation is, right? I think that's what has made me successful is I don't look for excuses. I look for solutions. I'm just wired that way. Because we can't always control our environment or what happens to us or around us, but you can control how you react to it, right? So if your mind needs to be trained and it's a muscle, if you're feeding it negativity and negative energy and negative thoughts all the time, guess what? You're not going to be a happy person. If you're feeding it objectivity, positive things, a lot of people watch these shows. I love a big crime movie as well. Mm-hmm. But if you're watching all these gloom and doom shows,
that's exactly
that got
what you're gonna be.
You gotta feed some positivity in your life. Listen to happy music, listen to other things, so you have a more positive perspective on things. Because when you walk in a room, if you have that doom and gloom energy,
nobody's not gonna want to.
You're gonna bring the room down. You're gonna bring the room down. I'll never forget. There was one of my wife's good friends wanted to go out. She's very highly successful businesswoman, making good money, and she wanted to meet people. So I'm the social butterfly. I've got all this networking stuff going on. I take her to a networking thing. Now, the networking event wasn't as great as it could have been, but she sat there on her phone the whole time. So when we left, I said, how many people did you meet? I didn't meet anybody. I said, well, I met about 15 people and made some connections. And I told her, I said, well, you were on your phone the whole time. You gave the energy that you wanted. You didn't want to be bothered. You weren't open. I said, so although the event wasn't run as smooth as it could have been, you got to adapt, right? If you keep putting out that negative energy, no one talked to her. Nothing. She was on her phone all the time.
They're like, no, she's not interested.
Yeah, she's not interested. I was like, you gotta put positivity, and you gotta look for the opportunities out there. With the new administration and all the stuff's going on there. I love it as a business guy. There's so many opportunities they're gonna have. Now, I'm not sure whether we're going in the right direction, but I'm not looking for failures. I'm looking for opportunities. There's so many opportunities that are gonna be right. So, yeah.
Like that. The other question that I had was, as far I believe, just having been married for over 20 years, looking back at some of the pitfalls that I had during those times, I am of the belief that when men are going through major transitions, they need space. Not that they need to be absolved of all duties, like you just run amok and just go have a great time. But I do feel like there is a level of space that needs to happen so that you can't have your feet in a whole bunch of places and come up with a solid plan. You can't have mental clarity on a major transition if you're being 50% dad, 50% husband, 50%, work person. All of it equals more than 100. And I feel like something is going to fall. How did your wife participate in those transitions for you?
That's a difficult one because we struggle with that, right? One, for me, hard to ask for help, right? So hard to ask for help. My wife has a whole different outlook on things, right? We're not the same people. We've grown, we've changed. What worked at the beginning of our relationship It's creating challenges now. We've been in it for a while. So there's some differences there, right? So what I would say is each individual is different. You got to find what that pair needs, right? You're not the same person that your husband met when you met, right? At the end or the beginning or the middle. They're different stages, right? There's different stages in life. There's different stages in a relationship, and there's different stages of development, right? Our experience forms us. So what you needed at the beginning of your marriage isn't what you needed 10 years in, 4 years in, 20 years in. It's different, right? You know, your environment isn't the same as his. Y'all have changed. So to me, communication is the key. Being open, being able to talk about it, right? Being able to work together, being able to say when you need space or not. Some people, for me, when I'm doing nothing, that's the worst thing in the world. I feel unproductive. I need to do something, right? So I do need my quiet time. When I'm working through complex problems, whatever, I need to get away, go in the office, go in the study, work out something, get my mind right in a space where I can do that. I got to carve out that time. But some people say, well, you just need to go sit down and do nothing. When I do nothing, I'm stir crazy. I gotta do something. I gotta be productive, right? I gotta be churning something out. Now I'll take my time and I'll take my gaps there, but I can't say that what works for me works for all men. It doesn't. It's different, right? Some of them are perfectly fine with doing nothing. If I'm sitting in the house for 4 hours, 6 hours, and absolutely doing nothing, I feel like a complete failure. I gotta do something. I gotta do something. I got to be moving, doing something somewhere. But then you take your breaks where you want to sit and binge watch something. I'll binge watch something as long as it's not all the time. Right. Can't be all the time.
Okay.
So
when you think about, because we're coming close to like the end, and I really like the way that this went, and I appreciate you. When you think about having to be busy and be productive, where do you feel like that stems from? Some people feel like people that have to always be busy, their busyness is tied up in their belief in their worth. What do you think about that?
I can see how people can have that. I don't think that's it for me. For me, in the military, I was fortunate. I was enlisted for a good many years, 15 years, and then I did my last 10 as an officer. As an officer, I ended up being executive officer. I was aide de camp for a 2-star general. I was an executive officer for several colonels. So you got to see high performing organizations at their best, right? Doing a lot of things, churning a lot of stuff out. I think that conditioned me that there's so much more that we're capable of than normal people that just float through life see. If you can be organized and do things, you can get so much done. You know, a lot of my friends ask me, they said, Charlie, how do you do so much community service? How do you do this? How do you do that? I said, because I don't do it by myself. Okay. I do it with other people, right? So for me, growing up with minimal resources, not having a lot of opportunities, now I'm fortunate. I have financial resources. I have a good job. I have a great network of people that I can work with, right? So for me, if I'm not doing things, it's other people that don't get these opportunities, right? I'm fortunate. My life has transitioned to a point I can do nothing and be completely fine. You can take away all my material possessions and I'm good. Okay. I'm fine. But I see how people can say, okay, they got to be going all the time because their work is who they are. I always tell people that I mentor, what you do is not who you are. Right. It's not. Because you're going to have failures at work. You're going to have things, companies are going to close. You're going to get fired. It is what it is. That's not who you are. That's what you do. That's just what you do. Who you are is those quiet times where you sit there, you reflect, you know, what are your values? What are you doing? Are you measuring them? Those standards that you have for yourself? Are you hitting them more often than not? And when you're not, what are you doing to change that, right? Do you need to change that standard? Or do you need to improve yourself. There's some people that don't want to improve, and I'm okay with that. That works for you,
Right?
right?
Okay.
If you don't want to improve, I'm not here to tell you that you got to live Charlie's way of life. No, this is what works for me. I've been given a lot of responsibility, so I need to share that. I need to do a lot of things and help other people out. So, yeah, I can see how people could say you're busy and you identify your worth. Yeah, that's not me, I don't think.
Mhm.
But I'd have to ask some friends that too. But because a lot of my friends are like, Charlie, you work too much. And I'm like, dude, I'm not in the military. I'm not getting shot at. I'm out here helping people that are in the military. Most of my customers are military customers. And I remembered when I had the uniform on, industry and vendors would come give us a solution and they'd leave and it wouldn't work.
Right. And then you had to fix it.
You got to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So my job now for my company is I make sure that doesn't happen. So I love it. I love what I do. I do work a lot, but it's not work if it's fun. I have a good time.
So I got two more questions for you. And one of them is one that I ask all of my my guests, and I like the answers that I get when I ask this question. If you could have the life that you have always wanted and you are void of nothing, but you had to remove your ego, would you choose that life or would you forego it and keep your ego?
Not sure I understand. If I could have the life I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to give up my ego.
Mm-hmm. Or would you choose your ego?
The ego for me isn't real high. I can laugh at myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm living the life that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I'd want something different. So I don't know. I don't, it's hard for me to wrap my brain around giving up my ego because I don't think I have one. It's, other people may think I do because I purport myself as pretty confident, but I don't have an ego. I can laugh at myself. I can tell when I'm wrong. I can accept my mistakes. So I don't know.
Okay. And so I asked the question, and I usually get a mix of answers. A lot of gentlemen will say, absolutely, I would give up my ego in a second. Others would, and then they think about the question, and oftentimes the shift comes when they realize that when we say ego, we're not talking about the things that don't allow you to laugh at yourself. Most of the time, they're looking at more of the overconfidence, and they don't look at how their ego plays a part in who they are and how it transformed them into being who they are.
Yeah.
And then once they think about that, they're like, oh, absolutely not. I would never get rid of my ego. I would just keep living the life that I'm living and give up the dream life that I've always thought about having. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And see, for me, like I said, being an inner city kid, I never would have thought I'd have the life that I lived. Mm-hmm. Never. And I enjoy learning in the process, the journey, right? Meeting new people, hearing their struggles, just experiencing. I love to read biographies of people that have overcome things. I just love the human experience. I'm a student of humanity. I just love to hear what different people have gone through because, life is a beautiful thing if you allow it to be.
Right.
Right. So for me, I love where I'm at. I don't know. Like I said, it's hard for me to understand the question because giving up the ego, what does that mean to me? I don't think I could do that because I don't think there's anything to give up really.
Okay. Understood. All right. So as we close out, knowing what the ListNing project is, how do you see ways for it to help out people or help out communities in understanding the male perspective? And what would you suggest?
Ooh, the biggest suggestion I have is get more men in the position that I'm in. You need to talk to a lot of people because I am not so pompous that, my view is a predominant view. Right. It's just my view. Mm-hmm. It's just one man's view. So for men, there's a lot of other men out there. And I told you when we talked, I want to share this, but I want to go through it so I know what I'm sharing, right?
Right.
So you've educated me. I know my biggest recommendation is talk to more people because there's so much richness out there. Men are so different, so very different. We come in all shades, we come in all sizes, we come in all different perspectives, and none of us have the answer for everything.
Right.
Right. But when you put them all together, that's a beautiful.
There's a beautiful thing.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you think I can go about doing that where they feel safe enough to sit on the couch with me and come up with those, those scenarios and conversation?
Talking to other men that have positions that can branch off and get you the right men.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want anybody sitting on this couch.
Right.
I
have no desire to have the bitter man on here that is. Yeah. Even though I feel like they do offer some insight because there are a lot of men that are having issues that they can't work through, but I don't know if that would be necessarily, So you're right.
Yeah, that's not helpful. For me, like I said, there's a lot of pain out there. Men go through a lot of stuff. Well, all people do, but men go through a lot of things, and it's hard to get help, and it's hard to heal from that. But for my upbringing and just my experience and my years on this planet is you have to adapt, right? If whatever your tragedy was that hurt you or whatever the pain that caused you, if you keep letting it live in your life every day when you wake up, then you keep reliving that pain.
Right.
You keep reliving that pain. You got to take the power from it and take control and get past it. However horrific it was, you got to adapt because each day you get 24 hours. Every day that you're here, you get 24 hours and you decide how you deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be a beautiful thing or it can be a tragic thing, right? And it can be somewhere in the middle where you got to get help and reach out to people. So overcoming that pain and dealing with things in a positive way, you can end the cycle of the pain. And I wish more men could do that. This is a beautiful project you have. I wish they could talk about it more. Come share their thoughts because whatever I share here, there's going to be people to agree, disagree, but our stories need to be heard so people know I'm not the only one.
Absolutely.
I'm not the only one. So
I agree.
I just thank you for the time and opportunity.
No, I thank you. And this went amazingly. And I hope to have more men get on this couch and understand that it is a safe space. And I thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I will do my part to get as many men as I can.
Okay. I want you to vet.
I will vet them.
And be like, okay, now.
I will vet them. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.